What is up, everybody? Welcome to the All NBA Show, part of the All City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Mares. I'm joined by the best analyst in the business, fresh off of the call from the Intuit Dome, Tim Legler. Legs, how you doing this morning?
I'm awesome, man. I'm awesome. We got the best game of the night. You know, you never know when you sit down to call a game what you're going to get. And your Clippers out there with no, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George out of town, and you're like, what is this going to be? And I thought the Suns were about to run them out of the building, and it didn't turn out that way. We get an overtime game on opening night. You can't ask for more.
You really can't. I almost thought we were going to get a double overtime game there for a second. You really get your money's worth at Intuit Dome. But we're going to break that game down in the first segment. That'll be our big topic today. Later on in the show, Marc Stein is going to be joining us to break down some behind-the-scenes stuff and also just analyze the extensions that all happened right before the season. Some pretty interesting extensions that might lead to, give some clarity about what's going on with some of these different teams. And then later in the show, Rockets, Hornets had a really fun finish, a really big comeback for the Hornets. We'll break that one down and talk about DeJounte Murray's injury. But first, we'll start with the game that you called last night, the Suns and the Clippers. For a while there, it felt like the Suns come out, they're gunning from three. That was one of the big questions this year. Budenholzer comes in, wants to open up the court a little bit more, get guys stretched out a little bit more, and early returns were great. The Suns were firing from behind. They looked like the Celtics for about 15 minutes. The rate they were getting threes up, they built a lead, and it felt like it was going to be a blowout. But what happened?
Yeah, so they go up 15 with literally under 3 minutes to go in the second quarter. And we go to break, and I'm sitting there with my play-by-play guy, Dave Pash, and I'm like, oh, man, this thing could be 20-plus at half. Yeah. In a new building, opening night, crowd was into it, and there's just not enough firepower for the Clippers. That's literally what it looked like. And then that little stand that they made at the end of the second quarter, the Clippers, defensively, the pressure that they applied, and it was amazing to watch how far out they were extended with, and they have a lot of speed and athletic ability on the perimeter defensively. They've got like four guys that can really get after it out there on the perimeter. And I thought that they bothered Phoenix enough over those last couple minutes where their possessions weren't very good. And the Clippers got some easier stuff because of it. They got out because they weren't making any shots from the perimeter in the first half, but they were able to get some stuff in the paint. And it cut the lead to 8 by half. And it wasn't a very pretty half. I mean, you look at what we watched in the opening night with what Boston did offensively, and then you look at a 47-39 game at halftime. That's what we're looking at. But at least the Clippers were within arm's length. Coming out of the locker room, they felt like they were in the game, and the crowd was still in the game. That was really important. And then then we just had a slugfest. And the Clippers, really controlled most of the second half. They outplayed Phoenix, but they didn't outplay them at the critical possessions down the stretch that allowed the Suns to win.
So the Suns were interesting because they had such a great rhythm early on in this game. And I think you're crediting the Clippers defense, and I agree. And I kind of want to know who you call out specifically for that. But it was like the Phoenix had a healthy rhythm. They looked like a completely different team in the best ways, right? You wanted to get more ball movement into their offense. You wanted to get more shooting into their offense. You had all of that. And just all of a sudden, everything derailed. And is it something the Clippers do? I mean, I think Ty Lue's one of the good halftime adjustment coaches in the NBA. Was it an adjustment you saw, or was it just as you mentioned, the intensity and the sort of confidence of, hey, they didn't pull away. We're still in it. Now we make our move.
Truly, Adam, I thought the intensity on the part of the Clippers was there from the absolute opening tip. I was really impressed the entire game. And in talking to Ty Lue before the game, we went over their roster and went over, their offense right now. And James Harden at this stage of his career, go back and be James Harden in Houston or be James Harden at his best in Philly. Man, that's a lot to ask of a guy at this stage of his career. So we went over it, and it seemed like they were changing the identity of their team to being more of a defensive pressure-minded team. And they have the personnel to do it, so it makes a lot of sense. And he brought in Jeff Van Gundy, who's really like the defensive coordinator now, and he's got a lot of tools at his disposal. There's a lot of switchability with these guys, and you can get out and harass. And some of it is going to be night to night, depending on how much physical contact is allowed by the officiating crew with hand checking and forearms and how far out on the floor you're allowed to touch guys. I thought a lot of that was going on last night, and that played to the benefit of the Clippers without question. The way they were getting into Durant and Booker in particular out on the perimeter, I thought it really affected them. So I thought the intensity was there the whole time. What changed was their offensive approach in letting James Harden sort of dictate possessions where he was able to bully some of the smaller guys playing him, and either smaller in terms of height or smaller in terms of weight. He physically just out-muscled people for a stretch and really controlled the offense. So it's one thing to just play hard and you're not scoring on the other end. Eventually you get demoralized, your defense lets down, and now, you get run out of the building. They kept playing hard. The difference was that they started to score. And so now you felt even more energized, because it's like, okay, these aren't futile possessions or futile energy we're wasting defensively that's leading to nothing. It's almost like an NFL team, right? When the defense is playing great and your offense keeps going 3 and out. Eventually the defense, like, they get demoralized, and now they lose concentration and they give up big plays, right? And now the football team, they're down 21-0, to use that analogy. In this case, they started to score, and I think that energized their defense even more. And the guys that really stood out to me, Derrick Jones Jr., obviously that's what he's known for. They brought him in for that. He was incredible, I thought, on Durant. Chris Dunn was sensational in this game defensively. Terrence Mann. These are guys that have really good length. They're wiry, strong, and they're really committed. And that's the main thing. There's a lot of want to there. And I thought it really did have a physical effect on Phoenix's top 3 offensive players.
I love your point I love the football analogy, because basketball, we make it so possessional, right? It's offense and it's defense, but these things are connected. And I thought this was a major factor in that Boston Knicks game in the first half. The Knicks couldn't get a stop, and it made it harder on the offensive end. They were losing confidence on the offensive end, because there was a snowball effect of, man, another 3. We're falling behind. Now we're down 9. And I think you're right about that with the Clippers, that when Harden started to settle things down and rewound the clock a little bit, there was a confidence boost there of like, all right, now we're getting a little bit of momentum going. But with James Harden here, he goes 10 of 28, not the most efficient night, of his career, 29 points on 28 shots, but he does get 12 rebounds, 8 assists. What I thought was interesting is he definitely, and some of this is just the hairline or whatever, but he looks older. Of course, he's not the young version of himself. He was so effective, but really in the mid-range. We're used to him doing all the stuff he did last night, but from the 3-point line, everything was in 1 step, back 2 steps or whatever. He was comfortable getting into the paint and then stepping back to the foul line over and over and over again. And I don't know if that's an adjustment to his game, like I said, getting a little bit older, if it was just the texture that the game took. But to me, that's a new wrinkle in Harden's game, hunting mid-range.
I completely agree with you, and I'm going to tell you right now, I think it's directly attributed to age. It's just going to be harder for him to be able to consistently knock down that step back 3 from those distances, at his age. It's just not, it's not reasonable to expect that. He was 2 for 9 on threes last night. I thought he had some better looks in the first half than the second that didn't go. And maybe that kind of changed his night from out there. And normally what it's been with Harden throughout his career, obviously that step back 3 is a big part of his game. Getting fouled on that shot has always been a big part of his game. And the fear of fouling him, it leads to him getting off more, even because you're really reluctant to lean in because he's so good at drawing that foul. The other ways that he has scored typically is, turn the corner, get to the rim, and get with inside probably 6 feet, either to finish with a layup or some sort of short floater. That pull-up shot from 12 to 18 feet, like, that's not been a big part of James Harden's game throughout his career. It was last night. And I think the reason is because he still has the strength to be able to muscle you and get you back on your heels so he can get that shot off with a little lean back. But to do that from 26, 27, 28 feet, the way he has done consistently throughout his career at this stage of his career, that's not going to be a high percentage shot for him. So he has to make that adjustment because guys are going to be up on him further out there because you're not as worried about that threat, about him drawing the foul on you, because I don't think he's going to take as many. So he adjusted to it. The area of the floor that was open was right there between the dotted line and the top of the key. That is where he was able to get to and make some really important shots for his team to keep them in it.
They are the team that lost it, so I'm only going to give one more note on them, and then we'll turn it to the Suns. But one of the questions, as great as Harden was, I do think he wore down the stretch. 8 turnovers. He still got to the foul line, but I actually thought one of the talking points across the league yesterday was that it's not that they've eliminated the foul baiting and they're, all of a sudden it's the bad boys Pistons, but I do think there was a little bit of a concerted effort on the refs' part of like, no, that was over the line of foul baiting. And I thought even Harden had a couple of those, especially the later it went, where the refs would kind of just let the play out and, hey, no, we're not calling that one. So I think he wore down. And then Norman Powell, it just was like the second option in this. And they relied on him a lot for offense. And he just had an off night, 5 of 16. I thought he got some decent looks. But when I look at the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard, I look at that and I go, I was impressed with the athleticism. I was impressed with the intensity and the defensive upside. But the scoring, to me, I can count on Harden, I think. But I don't know where the rest of the scoring is going to come from. They have a lot of guys that can pop up, but I don't know if they have a second guy that will consistently pop up.
No, they don't. And that's, I think in talking to Ty Lue before the game, we asked him about Kevin Porter Jr. and, his eyes kind of like lit up. Like, he's like, man, this guy's super talented, which he is. And I think looking at their roster, Adam, that is going to be the most logical place because he can create his own shot whenever he wants. Now, he had a rough night. He goes, what was he in the game? 1 for 8. And he missed his first 4 or 5 to start the game. He just never got into rhythm because the rest of those guys, they do rely on other people to help them create their offense. So the way they played last night, the defense is going to be the key to keep them in games. I'll tell you this, James Harden to play 40 minutes, obviously take 28 shots. That is not a formula for success for the Clippers offensively. And I know it's every coach's worst nightmare to get an overtime game on opening night when you got a veteran team. The last thing that Ty Lue wanted to see was that game go to overtime when you're trying to win the game at that point. And now James Harden's got to play 5 more minutes. Every time he hit the floor, the last, probably, 6-7 minutes of that game, last couple of regulation and overtime, every time he went down, which were several times, he looked so gassed. Like, that guys had to go over and help him get up, and you can understand it. It's a lot of energy to expend. He's also being attacked on the other end. Whoever he's guarding, those 3 guys are going at him every chance they get. Expended an incredible amount of energy for the first game of the year. They are offensively challenged of where it's going to come from when he's off the floor. That's going to be a challenge as long as Kawhi Leonard is out. And who knows? I don't think Kawhi Leonard's coming back anytime soon. I'd be very surprised maybe if we see him before Christmas. So you're talking about a couple of months minimum of trying to figure out how are we going to generate enough offense other than Harden, because it's just not sustainable to ask him to do that much on a nightly basis when he's in his mid to upper 30s here. That's going to be tough sledding for them. So their defense is going to have to carry the day some nights, and they almost were good enough defensively last night to get a win, but some great shot making down the stretch really is what pulled this out for Phoenix.
The other side of that coin was Phoenix, and in particular Devin Booker. So we talk about, okay, they were allowing a little bit more physicality. This was a very athletic game, I thought, on both ends of the court, but the Clippers stood out a little bit more athletically. And I thought Devin Booker struggled with that athleticism and the speed and the physicality. What did you see from his night that led to just 15 points and, more importantly, only 9 shots in 32 minutes?
Yeah, and I said it on the air. It was one of the quietest nights I'd ever seen Devin Booker have as a pro. And I don't necessarily think it was anything to do with his mindset. I thought a couple things the Clippers did defensively was different than you see most nights. I don't know the last time I watched a game where I saw that many perimeter defenders fight over the top of dribble handoffs and ball screens. You just don't see that much in the league anymore. There's a whole lot of going unders, blitzes, right? There's a lot of different things that go on to protect the defender. The Clippers were saying, listen, we got a lot of guys that can do it. Let's do it. Because if you can get over that to a certain extent where you're still in the play, it doesn't compromise the second defender. It doesn't compromise your back line. It doesn't force you into rotations. The way the Knicks got into rotation, every possession on opening night on Tuesday, and they never had a clue how to stop and slow down Boston because they were so lost on the ball screens and the dribble handoffs. The defender was so out of the play. The Clippers wanted to let their guys battle and fight, and I thought they did a really good job, especially on Booker. Every time he tried to come off a dribble handoff and get the ball, and he loves to come off of that full speed, turn in and then pull up from 20 feet with his mid-range while the defender's trying to chase him down. He loves that action. He didn't get into that action because of the Clippers. And so I think it just slowed down his rhythm of the night. Now, he made a couple really important threes later in that game off the dribble that were big-time shots. But just in general, I credit everything I saw last night in terms of the Suns being slowed down. I credit the Clippers more so than something I was watching with Phoenix that they weren't doing. I just thought the energy and effort was great. And it maybe caught Phoenix off guard a little bit. They thought they could operate normally, and they weren't able to. Unfortunately, they got some really nice contributions from other guys. While Booker was having a slow night, they were able to have enough offense generated in other places that they still were in control of the game early, and then they made the plays late that they had to.
Well, it's an interesting note about the dribble handoff coverage because obviously that's becoming a bigger part of the NBA. It seems every single year. Jusuf Nurkic, a guy that's very good at that, wide body and has a little bit of touch on his passes, can read those types of things. So that's a big part of it, but it's the length and athleticism to me of the Clippers. You can't do that with tiny guys. Because a lot of this is how can you challenge the shot? If a guy comes off the screen, how can you challenge the shot when you're flying around a handoff? And when you have length and athleticism, a shooter, it's in your head. A Derek Jones Jr., that length and his ability to get off his feet quickly, it's in your head that he's going to close the gap there. And so I think it's a credit to the Clippers is, who they have. Kevin Durant, though, here's what's interesting to me about the game. Kevin Durant was phenomenal, hit some incredible shots, 25 points, 7 rebounds, did not record an assist and had 7 turnovers. So he was very turnover. The game in general, 22 turnovers for the Suns, 21 for the Clippers. But what was interesting to me about opening night was they went to a lineup with Royce O'Neal at center in the clutch. And it's opening night. It was so interesting that was a card they were clearly prepared to play against a very good center in Ivica Zubac. And it actually worked. O'Neal drew a foul, got a bloody lip, kind of on a loose elbow. And they were able to actually, not suffer in the pain against that lineup and spread things out. So what did you make of that choice by the Suns? And are you surprised that it happened on opening night? I just felt like that's something you build towards.
Yeah. And look, you didn't have a full roster at your disposal. So it was interesting to see, which way they were going to go. Phoenix was going to go, and they went small. Now, Durant was the biggest guy in the court, but they put Durant on Harden.
Yeah.
So, it was interesting to me to watch Kevin Durant pick up James Harden like 60 feet.
It was fun.
Because this was after Harden had his run where he owned the third quarter. Durant guarded him a lot down the stretch. So when they go smaller, a lot of times Durant's going to be guarding somebody that's more like down on the baseline or the corner. So he can be a last line of defense with his length. I've seen them utilize that lineup. This was different. He was out at the point of attack, which left Royce O'Neal on Zubac. And here's where I thought the Clippers really played into it, and it almost cost them in regulation, where they lose the game in regulation. They had a 3-possession stretch when Zubac was on the floor being guarded by a smaller guy, and the Phoenix Suns just completely sold out to the fact that, we desperately have to get the ball to Zubac and take advantage of this mismatch. And I love Zubac. I think he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA. You're getting away from who he is as a player. You're getting away from what you are as a team when you sell out that much. And everybody in the building and everybody on the court defensively knew that what they were trying to do. And you know what you ended up with? An offensive foul. Another play where Tyus Jones made a great read and left his guy and came around and stole basically a pass where they were trying to front Zubac and throw it over the top. Tyus Jones came from the weak side and stole the ball. And then you had a missed shot. So a 3-possession stretch where you're just force-feeding Zubac because he's got a mismatch. This is not one of the top offensive threats in the league in the low post. He's a great player at what he does. I thought the Clippers really helped Phoenix out the way that they play. Just go run your offense normally. You'll end up with something great where Zubac gets a slipper and offensive rebound if you just go run your offense. They were too focused on getting him the ball, and I thought it cost them there and almost cost them a chance to even be in overtime because they almost blew it at the end of regulation.
I love the point about identity because you're right, man. That's not what they do. And then it's like, oh, he's got Royce O'Neal. Everybody clear out, abandon all things. We're a post team now. Throw it down to him like
That's
he's
what I was
Shaq.
watching. It was crazy.
And the thing is if you just say, like, you know what we're going to do? Put him in the dunker spot. Royce O'Neal's the low man now. He's the help guy. And no matter, even if he doesn't come off in health, if he sticks to Zubac's going to grab the rebound 50% of the time. So if you just play your normal offense, it's almost better to take advantage things there. But I'm going to give my most controversial take of the year so far.
Oh boy.
I mean, I'm a Colorado big man. I'm about 6'6". That's like a 7-footer in California. So I played big in for Colorado. I hated when they put the little guy on you for one reason. The referees start to feel bad. Oh, it's a little guy. He can't do anything. I thought Royce O'Neal headbutted Zubac's elbow last night. I don't even think it was a foul. I think he ran his head right into it. He got bloody. And I sat there and I go, as much as I didn't love the post up, I looked at the play in slow motion and I go, his elbow didn't move. He's just posting.
Well, listen, I remember that play vividly, and I didn't. It's hard to catch live, so we watched the replay, and what I said on the air was, I certainly didn't see a flagrant foul, but what I said was, look, when you're being guarded by a smaller guy in the post, that's kind of the height of where Royce O'Neal's head is, as Zubac is trying to just extend his arm to reach to establish, a target for an entry pass. Your elbow comes out to the side. If you're a 7-footer and you're guarded by a 6'7" guy, guess what? That's where his face is. And so it makes it really difficult for him. I will say this. There was a really big play in the game that fouled Devin Booker out when he got switched on to Zubac. And I thought, they barely gave Devin Booker an opportunity at 6'5" to even jockey for position. Like, as soon as he put any contact on Zubac's back on that switch, and the ball wasn't even ready to be entered in there, it was almost like the official in that case on the baseline. You almost got to be just absolutely staring at that and just waiting and saying to yourself, go ahead, touch him. I dare you. And as soon as Booker kind of tried to get physical with Zubac at all to push him off his spot, boom, Wetzel, he's out of the game. So they protected Zubac in that case, even though he definitely, I think maybe got the short end of the stick on the Royce O'Neal call.
Yeah, for sure. I see CK in the chat says, terrible take. Honestly, I'm telling you, must be a short guy. This is a big man take versus a short man take. The last one I got for you, Legs. The last one I got for you is that Intuit Dome sure looked weird, man. The halo, they call it, looks incredible. The wall is such a weird thing. You were there, like on television. Look, it was loud. That was the loudest thing. I don't know if they had the crowd pumped up too loud or what, or if it was just actually that loud in there. But how unique of a stadium? What is that?
Yeah, I think they the audio definitely, and I've heard there was maybe some issues with even the call of the game and people hearing it. So that's something. It's a new building, and when you set up for production, there's all kinds of things that you're going to learn. Yeah. And there'll be a lot of games, obviously, coming from Intuit over the coming years, and even this season, that they'll correct that. Definitely was loud. I've been in environments though, and called games, and certainly been at games much louder. So, it's a loud building, and that wall is pretty cool. I've never seen anything like that. There's nothing that exists like that in the NBA, where it's literally, it almost looks like you're looking up the face of like a cliff. It just goes straight up, and to the fact where, George Sedano, our sideline reporter, he went up there halfway up and did a little hit from that during coming out of a timeout. And I was like, man, what did that? He goes, that is steep. And I'm looking at the people at the top. And let me just real quickly, like, the concept of that's cool, Adam. So basically, it's the same price for any seat in that section. It's 51 rows from the floor to the top of the building. It's just one big section, and it's all about first come, first serve basis. So when the doors open, and it's very affordable. It's crazy. It's the most affordable seats probably in the league close to the court. If you're willing to get there like 2 hours before the game, you can sit down by the court for a very reasonable price. That was the concept. They want to create much more like a college environment behind that end of the floor where the opposing team's going to shoot in the second half. Very cool. The halo is something unlike it. It reminds me of the first time I walked into Cowboy Stadium when they built it, and the All-Star game was in Dallas that year in that building. And I looked up, and it was just like the same feeling, like, oh my goodness, like visually, There's nothing like that in the league. It's basically this crystal clear, ginormous screen that wraps all the way around the building. So it's a 360-degree view. You look up, you can see the same thing pretty much anywhere you look in the building. You know, normally in any arena, you have to look at one specific spot to get certain information. You could get it in a 360 view around the arena. Very, very cool. It was just an awesome thing. One last thing on it. I don't know if they talked about it during the broadcast. They might have covered it. I'm not sure if they did. You know, they put the jerseys. Did they cover the part with the jerseys of every high school team in the state?
No, I didn't see that.
So they've got every single 1,500 high schools in the state of California, and they've got a jersey from every single program framed in glass on the concourse level. So, like, if you played high school basketball at any school in the state of California and you go to a Clippers game and into it, you can walk around and find your school's jersey hanging up. I just thought that was a very cool, and it just looks cool visually as far as artwork, but it's also just a cool thing to add for anybody that goes to a game. You want to go find your high school jersey. If you played there, it's going to be up.
Well, I thought the halo looked awesome on television. It was funny. I saw a photo on the timeline of that. And then a little bit later, I saw the Jumbotron at Moda Center, which is basically like 4 80-inch Panasonic TVs glued together. And I was like, man, things have sure changed from the old stadiums to the new ones. Let's take a break. On the other side, we're going to have Marc Stein joining us to talk about all the extensions that happened. This week was big for extensions right before the season began. There's some interesting news and notes on that, and we'll get his opinions on some of the other things going around on the other side. But first, I'll tell you guys about visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for being the sponsor of this podcast. I also want to tell you about HelloFresh. With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store. I'm telling you, nobody south of 30 is going to the grocery store anymore. You order your groceries. Well, now you can order not only groceries, but a pre-planned meal kit for you at HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. It's a really cool product if you don't know. So HelloFresh, they have all these different types of meals, and they'll send the ingredients in a box, like a refrigerated box to your door. You can sign up so you can get these recurring every week, every month, whatever it is, how often you're eating it. You can get all these different, portions or whatever it is you're trying to sign up for. You can even label, is it for 2 people? Is it for 4 people? Are you cooking for the family, just yourself, individual? And they have all the different options so you can choose, hey, I like these meals. Send these specific ones to me. I had a chicken. It was like a lemony chicken spaghetti. Phenomenal. And on top of that, what I liked about it is some days I don't want to have to think about cooking, but some days I enjoy, I got some time. I want to unwind a little bit. Cooking can be a really fun and cathartic activity at night. And also, to me, just connects you a little bit more to your food. Well, this one was one that took maybe 15 minutes of prep and maybe another 10 minutes to kind of cook together. And then it was fantastic. So it's a fun experience, a fun little way to get your dinner. And right now we have this great deal. You get 10 free meals. That's 10 free meals at HelloFresh.com/free NBA. Again, /free NBA. Applied across 7 boxes, new subscribers only, varies by plan, but that's 10 free HelloFresh meals just by going to HelloFresh.com/free NBA. Really cool thing. Check them out. We are back here, segment 3, and let's now bring in the 3-man weave with Marc Stein from DLLS. Marc, how are you doing today?
I am good, gents. Happy season.
Happy season,
What's up,
man.
Marc?
Excited
Good
to have
see
you
man.
on. And excited to have you on regularly now. So if people don't know, we had Marc Stein on last week to co-host the show, but you will be joining us all season long on this very show as our newsbreaker and insider and sharing us some inside information. Very excited about that. You can also catch him on DLLS's post-game shows, including tonight where the Mavs kick off their season. But first, I want to talk to you today about these extensions. And how I wanted to start this, Mark, was a lot of extensions happen, veteran extensions and rookie extensions. They always get done in the days or sometimes day leading up to the start of the season. But which one to you was the most interesting?
Well, look, I think the veteran ones have the most impact because it's usually guys who, obviously are critical parts of their team already. And so Aaron Gordon was a huge one for Denver. And the Rudy Gobert deal, which followed the next day, that's why Minnesota really, we saw them trade Karl Anthony Towns, and now being able to sign Rudy Gobert at this much lower number. They're just in a much better place cap-wise to go forward with their team building. We don't know what's going to happen with Julius Randle there yet. He's in the last year of his deal. Is he just there for the season? Is he a long-term piece of that team? We don't know that yet. But basically what the Wolves told us by making that Towns trade was they felt they had gone, even though it was only their first trip to the conference finals, it was the first time in 20 years that they had even won a playoff series. But they just felt like with Towns making crazy money, with Edwards making max money, they had no flexibility to keep building a team around them. So by trading Towns, signing Rudy Gobert at this lesser number, they're going to be able to keep a player like Nikhil Alexander-Walker now. They're going to be able to re-sign Naz Reid at a higher number because the deal they got him on was a bargain contract. So it's really interesting that Minnesota took this approach that after waiting 2 decades for success, they felt like they had to make major moves to retool. And then obviously in your neighborhood, we knew that the Nuggets, they've let Bruce Brown go. They've let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go. And the messaging was they had to do that to be able to retain Jamal Murray, to be able to resign Aaron Gordon. Okay, so they've done that now. They've got Murray and Gordon re-signed. But this season, they've done very little to flesh out their team. Next season, they'll be in better position to spend a little bit more money around the edges and maybe even make a trade that helps. But I got to be honest, you are, of the three of us, you know the pulse of the Denver Nuggets the best. How do you feel about, okay, yes, they've got their core championship 4 are in place, but going forward, how do you feel about this roster? Because, I think you know where I stand on it.
Yeah. I think I'm probably a little bit higher than you are on what the roster can do this season, but I do agree with you that when you look at that second apron, the Nuggets, I think the Cronkies have always been afraid of spending a ton of money. But on top of that, the restrictions that come with your flexibility going forward, I think is the reason they got rid of KCP. But you brought up an interesting angle on it, which was when they lost KCP, your natural inclination was, well, are they just going to lose Aaron Gordon? If they're trying to be cheap, you set a precedent for how you're going to act. And to me, their messaging all along was, no, we sort of had to pick between the two, and we'll get the Aaron Gordon a deal done. And they got it done at the last hour. So to me, I look at that and go, I think they had a core 4, or they believe they had a core 4 more than they had a core 5. And this year will prove whether or not they were right about that assumption.
Yeah, and look, the jury is out on, do they have enough around those 4 guys to stay in the Western Conference Elite? And look, on one hand, you have to say, they still have Jokic. They still have the player who's widely recognized as the best player on the planet, and he doesn't miss games. So how far are they really going to fall if you still have the sturdy Jokic at the heart of everything? But, they did very little around the edges this season. Next season, because of this Gordon extension, they think they're going to be in better position to be able to make some moves to fortify the bench. And, we'll see. The season is just starting, but that's those 2 veteran extensions in the same division among, 2 of the top 4 or 5 teams in the West. Those are both significant.
Yeah, and my 2 cents on these two guys in particular is, yes, clearly Minnesota, based on the year they had a year ago, would love to contend this year, right? They would love to make that happen. I think realistically they understand, and maybe this iteration that they just added with Julius Randle is not going to be the one going forward. But Rudy Gobert is a guy that you're going to need to win. Whether Anthony Edwards is paired with Julius Randle or some other player in the future, Rudy Gobert is a guy that you have to have the way he plays. You don't have to run anything for him. He's going to impact the game in a lot of different ways, regardless of what the offense looks like or who you put on the floor. And the same thing for Aaron Gordon. He's a guy that's going to help you win. And Denver's in that same mode. We just won a championship recently. Yeah, we want to contend this year. We want to be in the mix. Maybe we're not quite there. I personally think it's hard to make an argument they got better than last year, and a lot of teams in the West. I think I can make that argument. So I don't know that Denver's going to get there this year, but Aaron Gordon, again, is a guy, you don't run plays for him. He's still going to go out there and compete and play. He's going to defend. He's going to figure out a way to find his pockets and moments to be very important. He plays well in big games for the most part. So it's a no-brainer to re-sign those guys while you're trying to figure out ultimately what's going to give you your best shot to really contend for a championship, either your first if you're Minnesota or to get back there if you're Denver.
And let's be clear.
Absolutely.
I mean, Aaron Gordon has been great as a Denver Nugget. Nobody's questioning whether he can live up to that deal. The questions are, can Murray live up to the number that he has now earned? And we know Jamal Murray at his peak, he certainly has, but coming off last season, the injury history, how he looked at the Olympics, there's certainly a question there. And then Michael Porter Jr., can he live up to his contract? Those are really the questions. Aaron Gordon has been excellent.
Yeah.
I mean, a fantastic fit in Denver. I don't think anyone around the league questions that.
Yeah. And I think the hope for him is that he can segue in the later part of his career into maybe more of an Iguodala role. I mean, he's becoming a smarter player. He's committed to being a smarter player. Jokic and him have incredible chemistry because of their ability to read the court together. And I think they're banking on that to only improve over time and that chemistry to improve. But if we go to some of the rookies, the first one I want to, or not rookies, I'm sorry, first contract extensions. The guy I want to ask about is Moses Moody, because I'm a big fan of Moses Moody, and he gets this extension and then didn't play a lot last night. And it was a game that you kind of thought he would for sure play a lot if he's a big part of their plans. But of course, with everything with Golden State, you have to wonder if every deal is just setting the table for some trade or something down the line. But what do you, not to speculate like that, but just, I thought the Moses Moody one was one of the more interesting of those to me. 3 years, $37.5 million. Do you have any insight on that one or any thoughts on that one, Mark?
Golden State got him at such a good value. I mean, that's a home run extension for Golden State. And here's the reality, and we're seeing this more and more. The teams, especially in this, these were class of 2021 first round picks. The teams really were in the position of strength there because next summer, the reality is there just isn't going to be tons of cap space sloshing around. Brooklyn can create more than $30 million in cap space, but as projections go right now, that's it. San Antonio and Charlotte can create a decent amount of room, but if you don't do an extension now and you go to restricted free agency, you have to ask yourself, where is the free agent offer going to come from? What kind of market can I really generate for myself if there isn't a lot of money in the marketplace? And just over the last 5 years in general, we are, from veterans and the rookie scale deals, we're just seeing more and more and more extensions. Players want to extend more often than not. They don't want to go to free agency anymore. It's very rare that we get what we saw with Paul George, who opts out and is signed into cap space. That very rarely happens in the modern NBA. Look, Steve Kerr's been very vocal about, I've got 12 guys, all 12 of them should play. I don't know who is not going to be in the rotation. And anyone who questions me, please give me your suggestions, because I don't know how I'm going to drop 2 or 3 guys from the rotation. So on a one-night basis, I'm not ready to say I'm shocked. But in general, the fact that Golden State could get Moses Moody on such a team-friendly deal, but then what we saw with Kuminga, the Warriors held the line and didn't give Kuminga the
That's
extension
right.
he wanted. What they're betting on is that the free agent money's not going to be there for him. And as a restricted free agent, they're going to be able to match any kind of offer that comes in for him. So, I mean, it's restricted free agency sucks for the restricted free agent. Even, even in the old days, it's never been good for the restricted free agent. But now I think it's almost more complicated because there's not free agent dollars waiting for you in July in most cases.
Well, the Moses Moody thing, I'm with Adam on this. I want to see the guy turn loose a little bit more. If you're going to play this many guys in your rotation, and that's not sustainable, by the way, by Steve Kerr. There's just no way you're going to be able to do that because you're going to have too many guys not get into rhythm when you're playing that many guys 12 to 15 minutes. So some of those guys will emerge. I don't know if this is the year for Moses Moody. I mean, it's funny because you see this tantalizing talent, and then you just never feel like he's turned loose and allowed to play through mistakes and get extended run, even on nights that he doesn't make shots early and everything else. 17 minutes a game last year. He played 15 last night. Now the game got out of hand against Portland. They win by 35 points. So I don't know if he would have gotten more, but I personally, for me, it's a great number for the team to get Moody at that number because I think he's very talented, but I just don't know when we're going to finally see this guy actually get let loose. He's just like this weapon that the Warriors have that you see little bits and pieces of periodically throughout the season. And I guess that's going to continue for the foreseeable future unless he just flat out emerges amongst this group of role players that are trying to fight for time.
And by the way, to that point, he got minutes. They played a 12-man rotation. He was the 11th man. So it wasn't like the game got out of hand, but even before it got out of hand, he was, and it's just weird. You sign a big extension. It's like, okay, the team's committed. You go to game one, 11th guy in. I just thought that was a really strange order there. But I want to ask you, the last one I have for you, Mark, the Rockets did an interesting thing. They have so many young players and a lot of young players I love, but they signed two guys to an extension. Jalen Green, 3 years, $105 million, and Alperen Sengun, 5 years, $185 million. And I just took note of that one guy got the 5-year, one guy got the 3-year. I've always felt like they're going to have to pick between one of those two guys. Eventually, they're going to have to make a lot of picks between a lot of different other young guys. But what did you make of that one, of those two signings?
I think the Rockets are actually giddy about how it worked out because they were able to get both guys for a little less than $300 million combined. Neither one is at a max level. So basically, they got Sengun, and I think, you guys know people say baby Jokic, and he has this tremendous upside. I mean, I think going into the summer, most people around the league would have projected that if Houston was only going to do a deal with one, it would most likely be Sengun. Now, the Jalen Green deal is interesting because it's so short. It's 2 years and an option, and you very rarely see an extension like that where theoretically Jalen Green could leave them in a couple of years. But Jalen Green's been so up and down in Houston, and it's been so unclear if the Rockets really want to commit to him that I think the Rockets feel like that is the right course for them. The deal can work out. And if he does, over these next 2 seasons, become an absolute star, that they'll find a way to give him another deal so they don't lose him. But, both of those deals, Sengun and Jalen Green, same thing with Jalen Johnson in Atlanta. I mean, we've been hearing since February that Jalen Johnson is the most untouchable player among the Hawks, that he really is a guy they want to build around, even more than Trae Young. But for much of the weekend, all the buzz was that Jalen Johnson wasn't going to get a deal. And then right at the buzzer, the Hawks get him for $30 million a year, which, again, sounds like a lot when you just say that number out loud. But, we're seeing maxes that stray into the 50s and 60 million now. So I think both the Rockets and the Hawks feel pretty good about the numbers that they were able to re-sign those players at.
Yeah, my last thought on this one, I look at those two guys, Sengun and Green. I do think there's a way to figure out how you can play with both of those guys and max your offense. Last night was a weird game. We're going to get into that, I think, in the next segment, Adam. But, because it was like Sengun a lot throughout the game early, but then he really wasn't much of a factor offensively for them down the stretch when they needed him to be. It was kind of a weird game. Jalen Green is a massive, massive talent. on any night capable of just going off. And I think with him, the question is going to be going forward. The money was certainly worth it. You've now got to figure out a way to get him to play with a little bit more poise and understanding there's more than one speed to play at, because his talent is undeniable. He's so explosive and unguardable at times, but there are times also his decision-making isn't great, and that's what they're hoping will change here over the next couple of years. But that's a lot. There's a lot of young talent on that team, a lot of pieces that they've got to try to figure out what they want to keep, how they want to build it. Because I still think when I watch the Rockets a lot of nights, I'm not exactly sure what they want their identity to be offensively. And last night, I thought in the fourth quarter was one of those times.
We really got to keep our eye on that team because ownership is so ambitious and they want a star. And the Rockets are constantly mentioned as a team that the next time a big star is on the market, they want to get in there. So they have this deep cast of young guys. It starts with Green and Sengun, but they've got 5, 6, 7 guys all under 25 who are super interesting. But you do wonder with the Rockets, are they going to try to make a move for a more established star? That's something we have to be on the lookout for between now and the deadline, and then again in June.
Well, they might speed up that process if they keep dropping games like they did last night, which is what we'll talk about next. But Mark, I'm excited to have you aboard all season long. Had some big stories you broke this week with these very extensions over on your Substack. So everybody check that out. So a great Substack to follow. And then the DLLS Dallas Mavericks podcast, which tonight will have its first post-game show of its era. Very excited for that as well, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, my honor, guys. Great to be with you, and let's do it. Let's hoop.
Let's hoop, baby.
All right, Mark.
All right, back here with Legler for our final segment. So we just talked about the Rockets. It's the Hornets and Rockets, two very fun teams. Two of our favorite. I love the Rockets. You're a big guy on the Hornets just in terms of teams that might not be playoff teams, but we like them. And last night they delivered one of the other great games of the night. The Hornets fell behind early in the game, stormed back late in the third quarter, and then outperformed the Rockets in the clutch thanks to some big-time playmaking and shot making from Tre Mann and Lamelo Ball. What stood out to you when you watched the close of this game?
Well, I think the first thing I want to say about this is, like, if you watch Lamelo Ball play and you deny the fact that this is one of the most highly skilled, just and entertaining point guards we have in this league, then I think it's because you just have some sort of personal bias, or maybe you don't like the way his dad sort of entered these guys into the league and all the attention he was getting at the time in a negative way. Put the spotlight on these kids in a way that you're just biased. Or, he's had some injuries to deal with, but my goodness, as he got flair and he's got so much confidence, and his handle, his passing, his shooting, everything that he does on the court is so electrifying to watch him. And he did it again last night. He opens the season and he drops 34 points, 8 boards, and 11 assists. And he hasn't played since last January. Just so impressed by the way that he played, and the way they played down the stretch. You're right about Tre Mann. Again, that's another guy that he's got that like Jamal Crawford offensive confidence in his game that he can go get a bucket whenever he wants. He was huge for them down the stretch. I thought that was a very entertaining game, and I was really impressed with the way that Charlotte was able to play down the stretch. Grant Williams had a couple of really big shots for them to help turn that game. It looked like Houston was in control, and the Hornets fought back and were able to get that win. A lot of young talent on the court in that game.
A lot of young talent. But real quick on Lamelo Ball, I've said this before, but, back in the high school days with Coach, the Ball family just played super fast. That was their thing. They would get up and down. They would take crazy shots, and they would play fast. And I've always said, Lonzo and LaMelo read the court so incredibly well, and I credit it to the speed at which they played basketball. It's like they were coming up under you have to make quick decisions, you have to read. And when you watch last night, LaMelo makes so many plays that are just bang, 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 like things happening in a row, and he's just reading it and finding the ball. And my favorite play of the night, probably his 3 that he missed so bad. He shot about 5 feet too far and about 3 feet to the left. But he read it. As soon as it left his fingertips, he runs and chases it, grabs the rebound, and actually somehow turned it into a layup. But to me, it was, as much as it was a wild shot, it's indicative of how quickly he reacts. Like, oh, that's off. I'm going to go find the angle, got the rebound, and turned a bad play into a good one. And he was incredible. So that stood out to me. But Tre Mann, I'm curious to get your thoughts on, because he's an interesting player, and he had a phenomenal last 3 minutes or so.
Yeah, and if they weren't running their offense through LaMelo, they were running it through him. And he had he had what he can do with the ball off the dribble to get into his shot, whether it's play with it a little bit and then explode by you, or play with it and then go to a step back shot deep. He put it on full display. And again, just oozes confidence that he knows that he can do what he wants to an individual defender on the court. Then you got, this freak athlete, Miles Bridges, is out there with these guys. And we didn't even mention Brandon Miller, by the way, who went out with a hip injury in this game. And we're trying to figure out what exactly it is. Maybe we'll get more information today. He had, it's 2 nights in, but that's the best dunk I've seen through the games that I've seen live and any highlights. The dunk he had, before he got hurt and left with that hip injury was absolutely incredible. And I think he's one of the young, breakthrough stars in this league. He's just on his way. There is so much young talent on the floor for this team at any time. If they play with maturity and they have good shot selection and they tighten things up defensively as they continue to grow and their concentration level is good, there's so much talent there. Any given night, man, that to me is worth 2.5 hours of watching, of the amount of guys on that team that they just have a flair for it in the way that they play. And by the way, some of these cheesy lines that you get out of broadcasters, they're obviously, premeditated, when they're waiting for a moment in the game to drop their signature, right? There was one in that game that I actually really, really like, and maybe I'm late to the game. Maybe they've been saying this from the beginning, but there was a play which they got a steal in the backcourt, Miles Bridges, and they advanced it. He's dribbling up the middle. He throws it to Lamelo Ball on the left wing on the break. And Lamelo Ball just immediately throws a touch pass. He comes to him, and he just touches it right back to him for a lob. And Miles Bridges goes way above the rim and throws it down. And the call was Airbnb, ball to Bridges. I actually really like it, man. I'm like, that's a really cool call. They go Airbnb, and they play with a lot of joy. That's another thing I like about Lamelo Ball, man. That dude is having fun the entire game, and there's nothing wrong with that. So, look, that was one of the best games of the night here on the real opening night of the NBA, because 10 games. I thought that was super entertaining, and I just like the way that the Hornets played down the stretch without Brandon Miller, who's going to be one of their go-to offensive guys. They made the big shots. Grant Williams, Lamelo Ball, Tre Mann, those guys were sensational down the stretch, and Houston had some rough possessions that I think cost them the game.
I love that you called out the joy that they played with, because that was definitely I think they're going to be a League Pass All-Star team, man. They're going to be a team that not everybody's going to know about them or be tuning into them, but when you do, you're like, hey, this team's kind of fun. They have some saucy players. And then Grant Williams did hit a pretty clutch 3 in that game, so shout out to him. On the other side, the Houston Rockets, man, because I love this team. We've talked about I love a lot of their players, but the big fear I had for them was going to be a lot of their spacing, especially off of the bench. Bench had a great first stint because they got out and run, a lot of defensive stops and got out and ran. But in the second half, that second unit, you really saw how clunky things can get, because there's a lot of guys on the court that you just don't respect. Amen Thompson had a free throw that was maybe the worst miss of the, that we might see all season long. That's how rough of a shooter he is. But down the stretch, they just made a couple mistakes with their starting lineup, including Sengun, who I don't know what happened, dribbles the ball down. I don't know if he was trying to throw it behind the back or if he just lost the touch or whatever.
I still don't know, Adam, what he was trying to do on that play. Was he trying to throw that behind his back out to the 3-point line, or was he trying to go behind his back and keep his dribble? Either way, you talk about an inopportune time to, channel your Pistol Pete on a play, on a critical possession. He just loses the ball, and Grant Williams dives on it. They get a timeout right in front of their bench. It's a huge play in the game, and I still don't know. And I don't know if Sengun, I'm sure he got asked about it after the game. I don't know if he addressed that, but that was one of the most bizarre things I've seen a center try to do in the open floor in that moment.
The thing is about it was okay, I think the ball just slipped or something. But the thing was, that game was an important moment, and I felt like he got sped up because I don't know what he was trying to do. He kind of was attacking downhill in transition. And it was one of those moments where it's like, hey, this is a really important moment. Are you going for a quick two? Are you the guy that should be dribbling like that? I just thought he got a little sped up, and maybe in his mind he's like, oh crap, I shouldn't do that. I should pull this out. And then he just fumbled the ball. But the Rockets, to me, I love the team. Fred VanVleet, 4 of 18. He did make a couple shots in the clutch, but before that, he started like 0 of 7 or 0 of 8 or something like that. And that's something for me to watch because they don't have a lot of shooting. They need him to be a big-time shot maker and to open up the court. And last night, I just thought he looked a little slow. Maybe it was just the matchup or what have you, but it's something I'm going to keep my eye on because they need Fred VanVleet to be that veteran scoring guard that he's always been. And if he's not that, I think they're going to have a lot of games. 105 points last night, and they had a 34-point second quarter. So that shows you how rough the other quarters were, and that's my concern.
Yeah, one thing to watch for this team going forward, first of all, the Jalen Green and Fred VanVleet, 26 of their 41 shots were threes. I mean, Jalen Green took 15 shots of his 23 or three-pointers. The guy's one of the most explosive athletes in the league at that position. And you're being baited into these shots. You can make shots, and there's going to be he'll have 40-point games this year. There's no question in my mind because he's that explosive, and he can get hot from out there. That's a terrible ratio. 65% of your shots from your starting backcourt from those two guys are three-point shots. You are helping the defense when that's the case. The other thing I want to look at going forward is, look, I don't know what Jabari Smith is on this team, but you didn't notice him on the court at all. He played 33 minutes, and he just is sort of an afterthought for them offensively, especially when you add Sengun into the mix with the two guys I just mentioned. So I want to watch that as well, and what's the plan with him? And then finally, Reed Sheppard. He was the 3rd pick of the draft. I love him. I think he's going to be a really good player in the NBA for a really long time. I'm curious to see, what his role is going to be. He got 15 minutes off the bench. He didn't really get much of an opportunity to do anything offensively. He's a really good decision maker and a guy that I think can be a really steadying force with their second unit in particular. He's a rookie. It's his first game. 15 minutes in a close game. He'll take it, I'm sure. But I'm expecting more out of him. So let's watch the progression of that over the first 10, 15 games and see if Reed Sheppard is able to impress himself upon Ime Udoka that you're going to have really quality offensive possessions with Reed Sheppard and the ball in his hands. But you got such a talented backcourt, man. And these guys, they get up a lot of shots and you're your main scorers. I don't know if Reed Sheppard can crack more minutes than that or not. But I do want to keep an eye on that because I have a real belief that good things happen and Reed Sheppard has the basketball.
I think they're going to have to be honest with you, Legs, just because of the lack of scoring off that second unit. But another great show, 2 days into the NBA. I'm so happy to be back watching NBA, but I'm equally as happy to be back talking NBA, of course, on this show and having everybody in the chat. We have 2 super chats, though. 2 first-teamers today. What do we have here, super producer James? Let's see if we have those pulled up. Maybe we don't. Oh, there it is. Psycho Blue, first-teamer for sure, Legs. Legs was world-class last night on the mic from one commentator to another. Thank you, Legler, for saving national basketball broadcasts with your nigh peerlessly pure hoop pontification. There you go.
That's high praise, man. We're one game in. Look, I love calling games. I'm going to call a lot of them this year, and hopefully I just get better every single night, and I'm just looking forward to the opportunity. One thing that helped me last night, when you get a close game, competitive game, compelling possessions, it absolutely makes the broadcast better regardless. So my buddy Dave Pash and I were lucky to have, I think, the best game of the night probably.
And then what's the last one we got here? BTS Dance Studio says, great show, Tim, and undrafted free agent Jeremy Lin inspire me 24/7. So you and Jeremy Lin are this guy's inspiration. Very random, but they pay for it.
So what do we got? So are you saying we had Lin sanity and Tim sanity? I'll take it, man. I'll go with that.
Tim sanity, baby. We're sticking with that. All right, guys, we are off tomorrow. We're off Saturday. We're off Sunday. A little 3-day break, but when we come back next week, 4 shows, all breaking down the games, and there's some great games on the slate, including my Nuggets tonight playing host to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Russell Westbrook's debut with the Nuggets. That should be great. Spurs Mavs tonight. Can't wait for that one as well. Wembanyama and Luka. We're going to enjoy it, guys. Do yourself a favor. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss it. Hit that like button to help us out, and let us know in the comments what you want to hear us talk about next week. We'll see you guys.
We all silly like the mayor.